If you're a passionate enthusiast photographer, then the 80D is the next step for you. Please be sure to check out our first video where we go through some of the features on the 80D and the button layout. In this video, we're going to have a look at some of the more advanced features the 80D offers and how they work. First, we'll start with auto. Located on our mode dial at the top, it is signified by a green box with the letter A inside. You'll also see on your rear screen what mode you're in at any time. Auto takes care of the entire image processing for you. It decides shutter speed, aperture and ISO. You simply need to compose your shot and fire when ready. Next, we're going to have a look at the creative auto modes. Simply turn our top dial to CA. You'll notice on the rear screen, an explanation comes up as we turn that dial. Within the creative auto modes, it allows you to make simple decisions, such as how much blur in the background I would like. To change these settings, we can either use the touchscreen by pressing the Q button in the bottom left, and then selecting how much background blur we would like, whether it be minimal or sharp, or we can use the left and right arrow keys. Let's have a look at some of the semi-automatic modes. Let's start with time value, also known as TV. On the top here, we can change our mode dial around to TV. On the rear screen, it confirms the setting that we're in and also gives us a brief explanation on what that setting can achieve. To change the settings within TV, we can either use the touchscreen, select the shutter speed value and swipe left or right to speed up and slow down. Alternatively, we can use the top rotational dial to increase or decrease shutter speed accordingly. Let's have a closer look at how increasing and decreasing your shutter speed can affect your photos. If I start my bobblehead in action and shoot it at 1,000th of a second, my image will appear as though there is no movement at all. Adversely, if I slow my shutter speed down to, let's say, 1/10 of a second, and I shoot the same object, you'll clearly see movement within the frame. A fast shutter speed is useful to freeze the moment within high-speed action, such as sport. On the other hand, a slower shutter speed helps show movement within the frame and influence the viewer. Next, we're going to have a look at AV mode. What I'd like you to do is change your mode dial to AV on top of the camera. And with the use of live view, you're able to see what I see. To change our aperture value, we can either touch the value on the screen and swipe with our finger, the same as we can with shutter speed. Alternatively, we can use the top rotational dial to increase or decrease the aperture value. Let's have a closer look at what aperture value does to our image and how it can influence the viewer. Remembering this model is a touchscreen model, so to gain our autofocus point, we can simply touch on the object we wish to be the main focal point. If we begin by shooting this scene at f5, you will notice that there is a very shallow depth of field. At an aperture of f5, you'll notice that it's isolated the subject that I focused on. The other objects within the frame are out of focus and indistinguishable. Let's explore what happens if we increase our aperture. So by using the top rotational dial, I'm going to increase my aperture to f22. Still focusing on the same point, taking my photo. If we look at playback now, you can clearly see all 4 objects are in focus. This could be useful if shooting landscapes. To change our autofocus points on the 80D, we can do this 2 ways. Firstly, locating the AF point changing button, located right behind the shutter release button. Looking at the rear screen for a moment, as I push this button, it cycles between the 4 different autofocus point options. Firstly, there's a single point option. We can move this point around by using the rear toggle wheel, up, down, left and right, or being a touchscreen model, we can simply touch the autofocus point we wish to use. Using that AF selection point button, we can expand that zone to 9 points. Again, we can move those 9 points around the field of view simply by touching the screen. The next across is a large zone AF, enabling 15 points of focus. We can choose between the left, center, or right-hand clusters. The last option is the 45-point autofocus mode. This puts it in the camera's hands to decide which autofocus point to use. This camera has 3 autofocus shooting modes. We can access the AF shooting modes by the button on top. You'll notice that there are 3 options on the rear screen. Again, we can use our finger to touch them, or we can use the dial to rotate between the 3 options. Let's have a quick explanation on the 3 different values. Firstly, one shot. To engage one shot, we can simply touch the screen or hit set. One shot allows us to half press the shutter button, which locks the focus, signified by a beep. Then when we're ready to take the photo, simply push. One shot's a great AF mode to be in for shooting still objects portraits, and landscapes, and the like. Let's have a look at some of the other AF options. Again, by pressing the AF button on top, we're able to access our AF operations menu. An alternative to one shot commonly used is AI Servo. Again, pushing AI Servo engages this mode. The main difference between one shot and AI Servo, where one shot locked onto focus on the object when half pressing, Servo continually searches within those autofocus points for movement and maintains focus with that movement until you're ready to push harder and take the image. Servo mode is commonly used in sporting. Another autofocus option is AI Focus. AI Focus is best described as a hybrid focusing mode, where you're letting the camera decide whether you should be in one shot or AI Servo based on the scene which you're trying to capture. This model is also equipped with a rear autofocus option. You'll notice a button labelled AF on the rear of the camera. The easiest explanation on how this works is by pressing this button, it gives you the same functionality as half pressing the shutter. It just makes it a more ergonomic way to focus, particularly when using servo modes. Next, we're going to have a look at white balance and how that influences our image. I'm going to pop the camera in live view here so we can all see what's going on. At the moment, our camera is set to automatic white balance. What it's doing is it's taking a reading of the light that's available around me and giving me the correct balance to make white look white. To change our white balance whilst in live view, we can press the Q key. Q will bring up the quick menu, also enabling the touchscreen for me. You'll notice at the top right here, the letters AWB, which stands for Auto White Balance. If I press this key, it will now give me the options of white balance on the screen at the bottom. You'll notice settings such as sunlight, shade, clouds, tungsten, fluorescent. Let's have a closer look at how those settings can influence the colours within our image. Firstly, let's have a look at daylight. If we take an image using the daylight function, our colours will look fairly normal in this environment. If I were to change that function from daylight to shade, for example, our next image will appear warm on the screen. If I would like to make it look a little cooler, I can also change that daylight function to tungsten, for example, which will certainly make the scene look cooler. White balance is adjustable to give you, the photographer, the ability to influence the viewer of your image. For example, if you were to choose tungsten on a sunny day, you can influence the viewer into thinking that you're in a cold environment. This model is also equipped with exposure compensation. What that is a handy little feature when you're in some of the automatic modes, such as TV or AV mode, to be able to tell the camera whether you'd like the scene to be brighter or darker. It's a very simple adjustment. Let's look at how it's done. Here on the rear screen, I've enabled live view. To change my exposure compensation, all I need to do is turn the rear wheel to the right to increase my exposure, or to the left to decrease my exposure. Live view is brilliant for looking at exposure compensation because it's giving me a genuine result of what the picture is going to look like before I've even taken the photo. A second way of changing exposure compensation is to use the touchscreen. Exposure compensation is commonly used in backlit scenes to allow the photographer to highlight the foreground interest. This model is enabled with multiple shooting modes. Let's have a look at what they are and how they can affect our images. To change our drive modes, this model has a drive button on top. By pressing the drive button, on the rear screen, we will now be prompted with our different drive options. Firstly, we have single shot. Single shot simply means every time we press the shutter button, it takes one photo. Changing over to multiple or high speed continuous mode, it allows us to take multiple shots repetitiously. We also have other options such as 10-second self-timer. 10-second timers are fantastic if we've got the camera set up on a tripod, taking a family portrait that we need to be a part of also. When we press the shutter button, the camera simply counts to 10 before taking a single shot. Another drive mode to look at is the 2-second self-timer. The 2-second self-timer is simply there if you left your shutter release cable at home, for example, on a long exposure. When you press the button to release the frame, sometimes you can shake the camera. The 2-second self-timer allows you to push the button, camera counts to 2, then it takes the photo. For example, another feature of this model is the interval timer mode. If you're a budding time-lapse photographer, then this model has the features that you will want. Interval timer modes allow us to trigger the camera repetitiously over a period of time determined by us. Let's have a closer look at how to set this up and what options are available to us. To access our interval timer, we simply hit the menu button, and in the fourth red menu, the first option you will see is interval timer. Again, using the touchscreen, I can enable this option. At this point here, it prompts me if I'd like to change some of those features to press info. Within the interval timer, there are really two options to select. Firstly, the interval between frames. At the moment, I have it set to 10 seconds. To adjust this, I can simply press that button and rotate my dial up or down to the selected value I would like. On the rear screen here, this is represented as hours, minutes, and seconds, really giving us the opportunity to time-lapse across multiple days if we wish. Below that is the number of shots we would like to achieve. You'll notice again by touching this value, we can increase or decrease the value. Below the interval is the number of shots required. We can adjust this from 1 to 99. However, if we want to do more than 99 photos, by selecting 00, this gives us unlimited shooting. What this means is that the camera will keep shooting until either the memory card is exhausted or the battery goes flat. The camera is also enabled with a bulb timer. This is handy for people who want to do long exposures in excess of 30 seconds. Let's have a look at how it works. Firstly, we need to change our top dial to B for bulb value. Within the bulb timer, we have two functions or two settings that we need to change. Firstly is aperture to determine how much depth of field we would like in our long exposure. And secondly, the ISO. Generally speaking, long exposures are done at very low ISO. Once we're at this point and we've set up our camera for the composition we would like. Now to set up the bulb timer, all we need to do is press the menu button. Right below the interval timer we just looked at, you will see that the bulb timer is now able to be enabled. By enabling this timer, we can also hit info here. We are now presented with a selection of hours, minutes, and seconds for that bulb timer. To change the numbers, simply touch the value you wish to change and then scroll your wheel up and down accordingly. Again, this is represented as hours, minutes, and seconds. So for example, to do a 2-minute 30 exposure, all I need to do is change my second value to 2 and my third value to 30. Press OK to confirm this value and you're ready to release your bulb timer. You'll notice on top of the camera at this stage, if you've done it correctly, at this stage you'll notice on top of the camera, the word timer has appeared in the drive mode box. To disengage the bulb timer, there are two ways to do it. Firstly, we can go into menu and simply change it to disabled. Another quick way of getting out of bulb timers and interval timers is to turn the camera off and turn the camera back on again. Let's have a closer look at picture styles in this model. Firstly, I'm going to activate live view so you can see what I see. Picture styles can be changed within the live view mode by pressing the Q button. And you'll notice here right below white balance is the picture style settings. Again, by pressing on that option, down the bottom here we have all of the various versions of picture style we can use, such as automatic, standard, portrait, landscape. But what I'd really like to show you is monochrome, which is signified with the letter M. Selecting this monochrome value, you'll notice straight away that the screen has become black and white. This is a really simple, easy way to be able to shoot high contrast images in black and white on your Canon EOS camera. It's worth noting when choosing a My Picture Style setting, if you are shooting a RAW file, the file will still download to your computer in full color. However, if you are shooting JPEG, then that JPEG will be saved as a monochrome image. Like many of the Canon EOS, we have the ability to shoot video with this digital SLR. To enable video mode, simply locate the live view button on the back of the camera. The toggle switch surrounding the live view mode allows you to turn to the video camera setting. You'll notice the camera goes straight into live view mode and we are ready to record videos. To stop that video sequence, the live view mode button now becomes your start and stop. Simply press once, you'll notice a red dot appear in the top right hand corner of your screen and the memory card light will begin to flicker, showing activity. To stop this sequence, we simply hit start stop one more time and our video is completed. To go back to stills mode, we then just toggle on the top button and we're ready to take pictures again. This model also has the feature of Timelapse Movie. To do this, what we need to do is put the camera into video mode to begin with, then use the menu button to navigate across to the 5th red menu. The second last option on the screen you will see is Timelapse Movie. We can either press the screen and enable it or use the directional keys and set to enable this particular feature. Below, you'll notice that there is quite a few options. To change these, we simply need to press the info button, or again use the touchscreen to toggle through the options. One of the great features of Timelapse Movie mode is it actually gives you the data as it would be given the settings you've put into the camera. So for example, if I have an interval of 3 seconds here and the number of shots I would like to take is 300, represented graphically down the left-hand corner is how long that will actually take to complete. So in this case, just shy of 15 minutes. On the right-hand side, it gives me the playback time of that time-lapse movie. To change any of the settings on this screen, again, we can use the touchscreen, or we can use the multi-function rotational dial to increase and decrease these values. Once we're happy with all of these values, all we need to do is press OK, and we're ready to shoot our time-lapse video. Another creative feature of this model is multiple exposure mode. To access this, we simply hit the menu button, navigate to the third red menu. Second option from the bottom is multiple exposure mode. To enable this, we can use the touchscreen or the up, down, left, right arrows and set key to confirm. I'm going to pop the camera into live view mode so you can see what I see. First of all, I'm going to take a photo of the stack of objects here to the left-hand side of the screen. The camera saves this photo and it allows me to manipulate the scene by moving this stack to the right of frame. In live view mode, you'll notice that it actually gives you a ghost image of the original photo, allowing you to move the object with precision. By now taking the second photo, the camera will busily add those two together to save one file with multiple exposures. This is a great way to get creative with your camera. Another creative feature this model has is HDR mode. HDR stands for High Dynamic Range. To enable this feature, we press the menu button at the top left, navigate to the third red menu. All the way at the bottom, you'll notice HDR mode. Using the touchscreen, I'm going to enable HDR mode, and it presents me with 4 options: automatic, plus, -1, 2, or 3. So let's look at HDR mode in action. Firstly, what I'm going to do in using the touchscreen is enable HDR mode for 3 stops. What's going to happen is it's going to set up the camera to take 3 photos. The first photo is going to be correctly exposed, the second is going to be overexposed, and the third will be underexposed. The camera then takes all 3 images and pushes them together into one correctly exposed image. The advantage of using HDR mode is it gives you all of the details in the highlights and the shadows, all in one picture, all in camera. Here's an example from outside of a normal photo next to a HDR enabled photo. You'll notice in the normal photo, the areas that are in heavy shadow have no detail, as where the HDR photo, we've captured all of that detail. One of the most commonly asked questions is, should I shoot RAW? Let's have a look at some of the image setting options first, and then we'll explain what the differences are. To change the image quality on this camera, we simply press menu and navigate to the very first red menu where you will find the option for image quality. Using the touchscreen, I can now activate the different options of image quality. You will notice that there are RAW and JPEG files as options. A simple explanation of RAW versus JPEG is a RAW file takes all of the data from the sensor and saves it to the card, as where a JPEG is pre-compressed in camera to make the file smaller. There is an option on this camera to customize some of the buttons on the hand grip. Let's have a look at these options in detail. Using the touchscreen on the back, we have a symbol for custom function buttons to the right-hand side. By pressing this, it launches us into the menu where we can go into custom controls. Some of the options here are simply to remove autofocus from the front button, being able to change the AF on buttons function, and even changing the function of the depth of field preview button. So if you have a pre-set custom setting that you commonly use and you'd like to assign it to a button, this is the place where you can do that. Another thing to know is how to clear all the functions on your camera. Maybe you've loaned it to somebody and it's acting a little funny because they have played with some of the buttons and you want to clear it back to factory settings. To do this, all we need to do is press the menu button. We navigate across into the yellow menus and you will find on the 4th yellow menu an option for clear all camera settings. Simply press set, come across to yes or okay to confirm, and it will reset the camera back to factory settings. I hope this video has helped you get a little bit more out of your ADD. Happy shooting.